Welcome everybody to day 2 of DEMOFEST. My name is Garen Hess. I'm the founder and CEO of Consensus, the organization hosting DEMOFEST this year and every year. Our first annual DEMOFEST, so we'll say it that way. We're really excited to welcome you to day 2. We've had a phenomenal response in terms of participation, registration, and some great sessions yesterday. Thank you to all of our presenters who presented yesterday, and for all of you who are participating remotely from all over the world. It's been fun to see all of the interactions going on, the questions, the comments, and out in our LinkedIn group. So we encourage you to join our LinkedIn group, which is called the Scaling Pre-Sales and Sales Engineering group. So in every session, you should be seeing a link to that. That's where the recordings are going to be posted. So just want to invite you to join that group, and we'll also be trying to cover and post questions that we don't get to from sessions in that group so that the presenters can go out and engage with you and the rest of the community in around those questions. So one other thing to remind you about is that if you were here yesterday, then you may know this already, but if for some reason you can't find your link to each session, you should be able to find it out at the DEMOFEST website. So that's just demofest2020.com. If you click on any given session, there's a help, I can't find my link area, and you can just go click on a link that we provide there, and that'll get you in, regardless of whether you can find your link or not. So just want to remind you of that. So as I mentioned, DEMOFEST is hosted by Consensus, and we are the leaders in interactive video demos and what we call intelligent demo automation. So we help companies scale pre-sales, and I'm excited to hear from our first presenter today, Adam Freeman, which I will let John Cook announce here. Before we do that, just want to give a shout out to John Cook and the staff here at Consensus and for all that they've done. And they've done a phenomenal job getting this organized. Before we jump into this session, I want to just give a quick shout out to some people who are doing some great things with the community in what's called the Presales Collective. So if you haven't heard of this, I encourage you to go out to presalescollective.com. It's run by a couple of really great guys with some good experience in sales engineering and trying to build the community. And the Presales Collective is a group of professionals that, and the collective, they try to provide professionals with resources, knowledge, network, and mentorship to develop long, impactful careers. So that's the blurb they asked me to share with you. So anyway, really excited to see that many efforts are going on to build the sales engineering community and profession. So with that, I'll turn the time over to John Cook, the conference organizer, to introduce our first speaker for day 2. Oh, and thank you, John, for going to this next slide. Wanted to mention that the last conference of the session today, I hope you don't miss it. It's going to be an interactive panel with 5 pre-sales experts, as well as some great giveaways. So at the beginning of the session, you'll be able to register for the raffle, and we'll have some drawings at the end of the session. So it should be a really fun and interactive way to end the conference, and just encourage you to attend that one if you possibly can. Only those who attend can join the raffle. So that's our little hook for trying to get you to come to our last session there. And now it's over to John to introduce our first speaker on day 2. And John, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
I knew that. So I've been looking forward to this session for weeks now. So really excited to introduce Adam Freeman. Adam is pre-sales leader with the Access Group, and he's a leader of what I would call an ultra high performance pre-sales team. And I don't say that lightly. the reason I would call them that, there are several reasons, but I've seen how quickly and excellently they execute, and I've seen, I know kind of the workload that they carry, and I know a little bit about just the sheer amount of business they support. So really, really amazing stuff going on over there at the Access Group in the pre-sales with Adam Freeman. And so with that, I also, just a quick reminder, if you have any questions, go ahead and pipe them into the Q&A as opposed to dropping them in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat during the session, but that'll just help us kind of tee everything up for the Q&A at the end. And the recording for this session, as Garen indicated, will be posted first on our LinkedIn group, and there's a link to that in the chat already. All right, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you, Adam.
Thanks for that, John. Thanks for the welcome and the introduction. So I'll just turn my video on, just turn my screen sharing on so you can all see what I've got to present. Cool. You can see my presentation okay?
Looks good.
Cool, brilliant. Okay, so I'm sure when you read this title, like many, you'll have thought, what a dry subject, okay, non-financial performance indicators and why they're relevant to pre-sales. But I think when myself and John discussed me running a session here, I didn't probably appreciate how relevant this was going to be. And so what I've done is I've added a couple of slides in here to make it relevant to the situation we currently find ourselves in as well. So first things first, I always like to think every meeting we have internally, whatever we do, I always say, let's set ourselves up for success in everything we do. And so the two things you're going to need today, no more, no less, are Mentimeter, so menti.com, and I think John's going to put a link to that in the comments, and you can go to menti.com from your browser, from your phone. There's also a native app, iOS, Android, whatever kind of platform you use. The second thing you're desperately going to need is an open mind. And the reason why I say this is KPIs is something quite close to home for a lot of us. It monitors our performance, it's how we do it, it's our worth to a business. And so when I talk about why should we change KPIs, why should we review our KPIs, I'm really talking about how am I going to influence you and your day-to-day life, and I don't take that lightly. So what you're going to need is just a little bit of open mind, hear what I've got to say, and then let's review it to the end where we get to. Okay. Cool. So I'm going to start with one of my other passions in life, apart from pre-sales, which is my Peloton bike. I absolutely love my Peloton bike. And I thought it was a great place to start. I was on the bike last night and I was like, what better device typifies KPIs and the relevance of them? So for anyone that's not relevant, a Peloton bike is a spin bike, and there are other spin bikes available, just to be clear. But the Peloton bike is interactive class. And during lockdown, when I can't go to the gym's been coming to me, and it's in my office. And basically what happens on a Peloton bike is there's this screen area here. So just up at the top, this screen. And what's on the screen is two particular KPIs. One of them is how fast you're riding, cadence. And the other metric that you get given is your resistance, so how hard it is to pedal. And the combination of those two gives you something called output. And the higher the output, the higher up this leaderboard you go. I mean, I was on a class last night, there was 30,000 people, right? And I was definitely nowhere near the top, but I also wasn't near the bottom. But why is that relevant in KPIs? Why is that relevant to what we're talking about today? KPIs let you know where you stand. They let you know how successful you are. They let you know that, you know what, I'm better than these guys, but I'm not quite as good as these guys, so I'm going to learn. It gives you an idea of where to shape yourself. If I pedal faster, at higher resistance, my output goes up, I go further up that leaderboard, right? And that's a real example of a non-financial performance indicator. How good am I? What's my output given my inputs? And I thought that really typified what we're trying to do here today. So again, relevance of this session in times of COVID, we're going through a whole digitalization of sales, it feels like, around, or over the last few weeks, last 10 weeks, there's been this massive shift towards web demos and change that's inherent in how we sell and how we position our software and how we present. And that change and that digital change is really what's defining, a lot of people have been asking the question, what's normal? You hear this new normal banded around and the old normal, and we're not going to go back to normal. And I ask the question, well, what is normal? And so therefore, in a time of great change like this, we need to really consider, are our metrics, are our KPIs, are they relevant, okay? And the final bit of advice I always love to give myself, and I think, is never waste a crisis, okay? Out of a crisis comes excellence. I always firmly believe that, at Uber and other inventions come out of the last financial crisis, for example. And I feel if you embrace this time, if you embrace what's happening in COVID, you learn and adapt and be better. you will come out of this a COVID superstar. I absolutely guarantee it. And I can only see that with my team at the minute. My team are embracing change. They're at the forefront of what we're doing. They're changing their game. They're up in the game, and they are absolutely smashing it at the minute. And, you know, more than happy as we get towards the end here to discuss how we're doing that as well. And I thought this was very relevant as well. So this is, everyone's used to seeing COVID curves at the minute. You know, we're flattening the curve, we're in our peak, all these various analogies that people are using around COVID. And what this is basically doing is monitoring over time momentum. And now that momentum can be business, velocity, it could be momentum of your career, it could be momentum of your learning and development. It doesn't matter what it is, the same thing applies. And everything was going fine, and then COVID hit, and momentum took a little bit hit. And then we kind of feel like we're gaining a little bit of momentum now, depending on, you know, where your local economy is. And then you're kind of venturing into this, from this old normal to this new normal. And what that new normal is, no one really knows yet. Nobody has any certainty. And so I've kind of broken it into a couple of stages, really. This adaptation stage. So this adaptation stage that was in the middle here, this was when, okay, COVID hit, we had to go work remote. Right, we need to adapt to working remote. We need to make sure we've got our, you know, our web conferencing software, that we've got our networking ability. We can't meet face to face. How are we going to work? So we're adapting to the situation. Then we learn from that. We take our first snapshot of data. How well are we doing? Are we ahead? Are we behind? Where are we? And we learn from it. And then what we do is, as we come out and we gain momentum again, the easy thing to do is to switch back to exactly how it was before. And what we don't take is the opportunity to optimize what we're doing. And this is something we're doing at Access right now. We are optimizing how we work, so that when we gain that velocity coming out of this horrendous crisis that we've had, there's no sugarcoating it, that we gain that momentum, but we gain that momentum in the right way. And so new normal for us as a pre-sales profession, as a company, is much better than what old normal was, okay, and we're the masters of our own destiny. But I thought that was very relevant right now to show. So, not that it's chapter and verse about me, like I say, I don't know if I can live up to that fantastic introduction that John gave us, but to be honest, it's quite right. So my background, I'm a qualified accountant. I've come from accountancy and I went into IT. I'm not an IT person by heart. I went through consultancy into pre-sales, love pre-sales. It was definitely where I should have been. And then I progressed through leadership, and now I head up the pre-sales team at Access. And, you know, I am a geek at heart. I'm massively a geek at heart. I love tech. But the one thing I will say as I go through his presentation is I am blessed with a phenomenal pre-sales team. As John said, some of the numbers the guys put out, some of their stats, how they behave, how they perform, they bring their A game every single day. And so when I speak, you know, one of my prerequisites is I'm blessed with a fantastic team, and I can't thank them enough for that. But the second thing is Access and why it's relevant, and putting it into context. We've gone through a massive shift over, I've been here 9 years now. I was employee number 100 and something, and we're now up at over 3,000 employees. We are hyper growth. We're classed as a unicorn. As John said, you know, there's a lot of hard work gone into that. We're UK based. We have offices all over the world. Around 300 million turnover. If I was putting a number on that slide 8-9 years ago, that would have been about 10 million turnover, just to put that in perspective. And we're growing 30% year on year on average since FY15. And it's easy to say, well, Adam, you know, anyone can grow when you're acquiring 26 companies like we have since FY15, but that double-digit organic growth behind it is really what's powering that as well, and that's something we're very proud of. But why that's relevant to this session is that as the business has changed massively, and as my career at Access has changed massively, I've experienced a vast array of KPIs, some good, some not. And as the business changes, it's how we've adapted KPIs and brought new ones in and let go of old ones. And that's why this session is very relevant and very pertinent to what we've done of Access. And so I was going to make a quite dry topic, and it is, you know, I'm an accountant by heart. I love KPIs. I love, you know, you're hearing a financial accountant say, do you know what, financials aren't the be all and end all, okay? But I'm going to introduce you to two of my team. These guys pulled the unlucky straw. I basically had to catch up with them yesterday. So I said, by the way, can I use your photos and can I use your name? They haven't got a clue what I'm using it for. They were very trusting. But I've got David, I've got Andrew, fantastic part of my team. And I'm basically going to cut some numbers around them. Now, I would like, I've seen keen to stress, like John said, every one of my pre-sales guys is above 100% on all the metrics. I give them a fantastically talented team. So when I simulate this, okay, it's based on some mythical numbers. So I'm simulating a scenario here where David has contributed 1.8 million, which is 120% of a standard target of say £1.5 million, just to make the maths easy. And we've got Andrea, and Andrea's done 1.2 million of her 80% target. And as with any good KPI, any KPI, you need to put context around KPI. That's the most important thing. So for context, we've got David's line here. So David contributed 2.1 million last year, 1.8 this year. So a consistently high performer. Andrew did $750,000 last year with 1.1 million this year, so 80%. So I'd ask the question based on that, and I'm going to ask you the question if you can go to your menti.com. If you were appraising these guys, if you were saying, if you were putting your money behind someone, who's the performer? Who is performing in my team scenario there? So if you want to kind of go to menti.com or use your app, use the code 575844, and you should be able to vote. Should let you into that slide. Just let a couple of seconds. I'm guessing based on those people have merely misunderstood the numbers, okay, or they've got it very wrong. So Andrew was obviously 80% of target, David was 120. So the performer you're expecting really is David. So someone's seeing something in Andrew that I'm not seeing right now on the numbers, okay. So the reason why I've asked you that question through menti.com was based on the industry survey that the guys at Consensus did. Great survey. I read it on my iPad, and I got to this page and my Apple Pens came out and I was annotating like mad. I could not believe some of the stats that had been presented, particularly around the fact that the amount of pre-sales people that don't have any KPIs. That was quite interesting, because how do you know what worth you bring to a business if you don't have any KPI? But the other one was the fact that revenue and RR was far and away the number one. And the reason why I said I was surprised at that wasn't that revenue is the main driver behind pre-sales. It should be. We all need to pay the bills. You know, we need to keep the lights on. It was the fact that how low one of the other ones was, which was average time. So how much revenue you're generating per activity, or how long you're there, because that's a better measure of efficiency, I would say, rather than just, you know, I'm top dog and I'm generating this amount of revenue. So that's why I've asked you that question. Based on who was performing, what you should have really told me was, well, David's performing. David's done 120% of his target. He's performing, right? He's the standout performer. Now, KPIs are great, and financial KPIs are great. And there's a reason why they are the standard and why they make up, you know, the top 6 KPIs on that survey were financial KPIs. And the reason is that they align with a company's strategy very, very well. So if the company's had a great financial year, the financial metrics move. If we monitor based on financial metrics and we get positive performance, then we know that we're going to have good financial performance. They're easy to measure. You know, the data's already harvested. We go and we collect financial data as our regular pattern of business. So we don't have to go and get any data. We might have to interpret that data. We might have to reformat that data, but the data collection is done. Therefore, they're easy to measure. They're reliable. They aren't subjective. There is no as a pound is a pound is a pound is a dollar. You know, it doesn't matter. The numbers are the numbers. But the downside of them, and they do have big downsides, are they are a summary of past performance. And the big one for me is they are absolutely no indicator of any future economic performance. Okay, so we will all know salespeople, we'll all know pre-sales people that had a storming year last year. They get to next year and fall off a cliff. It's like, you know, they get behind the number, they never really catch up. So just because you've had a great year and you've just had an amazing set of financial results doesn't mean you will next year. There is no God-given right to, you know, to be a top performer year in, year out. You have to go earn that. There's a short-term focus, and what I mean by that is sometimes in the pursuit of that extra pound, that extra little bit of revenue, you can be a little bit short-sighted. You might not run the sale how you'd like to. You might force the sale a little bit much, and so that short-term focus can actually hinder your long-term gains. And it's quite hard to get a regular pattern of business, and I think this is very relevant right now. You know, with COVID hitting, the effects of COVID might not be seen in many people's financial metrics until month end, until the first month end. And so that kind of in-month reporting, you have to kind of wait until your financial period's ended, or your period of financial collection, to actually really understand the data. They don't react very well to external changes and influences. So although I'm going to tell you financial KPIs are a big part of what we do, they're not everything, okay? And this is exactly why. And so if I was to model that again over those same numbers, so Andrew's upward trajectory and David's kind of modest trajectory, let's say I want to say, okay, well, I'm budget setting for 2021. Where do I think I'll be? And if I look at Andrea's numbers there, we could see this. We could see her move into a position of A, B, C, or D, because those financial metrics, like I say, give us no indication of what we expect that final outcome to be. And so what we can't do is very well shape progression plans, development plans, those kind of things, because it's very hard with just financial metrics to see where someone's going to end up. And so that's where we need non-financial performance indicators, NFPIs. Now, I'm very sure there will be people on this call who have NFPIs as part of their KPI suite. I know they are because they're on that report. There will be people that have them there that don't really understand why they're there. There'll be leaders that have maybe had them there and they're there because they've always been there. And so I think just as an understanding, I'm just going to lay the foundations of what these things are, why they're there, and why we need to embrace them, and then some examples of what's good. So, a non-financial performance indicator are metrics that are not directly linked to the monetary event. So, for example, things like, customer satisfaction, that is not a measure of pounds. What it is a very good non-financial performance indicator, right? So the higher, it is proven that happy customers tend to spend. But I've seen equally very unhappy customers, say FD left, new FD comes in, they're left with this kind of mess to clean up because the previous FD kind of knew they were retiring, they didn't keep on top of the systems, and they call us, go, help, I'm kind of swamped, I need some help, I need some training, I need to get my systems up to date. And sometimes unhappy customers are the ones that actually spend as well. So it's not always directly linked. But I always like to think of non-financial performance indicators, because it's anything non-financial, it's pretty much, blank book. You can go wherever you want with these guys, right? But I like to categorize them in three ways. External, from the point of view of customers. So what NFPIs apply to customers and outside of my business. What apply to my processes or my internal factors. And what's individual level. So what can the individual themselves, the pre-sales person, the SE, whatever you want to call them, what can they influence themselves? And I tend to break them into these three categories, and it really works for me. So if I look at external customers, things like customer satisfaction, retention rates, net promoter score, big part of the business. If you're not sure what net promoter score is, I'd encourage you to do some kind of net promoter scoring within your business. It's basically a measure of out of 10, how satisfied are you? We'll all have had these via email, with some kind of online shop or something we've dealt with. But what an NPS does is it basically says anyone that scores you 0 to 6 is a detractor, they're unhappy. Anyone that's a 7 or an 8 is passive, they're kind of, so what? And anyone 9 and 10 is an active promoter, and the balance you want to get to is as close to 10 on average as you possibly can, because that's, an indication of your brand. And the theory is that the higher net promoter score, the more advocates you've got, the better your financial performance should be. So it's a superb non-financial performance indicator. You've got your internal and your processes. So you've got things like event tracking here, demos to win the deal, and you've got your employee productivity ratio. Now that EPR at the bottom, just to be clear, that you could apply to anything. So you could say how many blog posts does a certain SE produce for marketing on average per year. That productivity ratio can be whatever you want it to be. But it could be something like how many demos does it take to win a deal is another fantastic characteristic. Event tracking as well, how productive, how utilized are my staff. Training and development. So, if I know I've got highly skilled employees, or I've got employees that are becoming more and more skilled, the likelihood is they can show more software. Therefore, our cross-sell, our upsell, those kind of aspects should improve, okay? Good training and good development also retains my staff. Longevity of service is another key factor in positive financial performance as well. No one wants to be constantly hiring and having a high churn on their staff as well. Internal promotion ratio, that's something that I've considered before. Have I got the right mix of people within the team? If that internal promotion ratio, i.e. I've promoted someone into pre-sales that maybe were in another part of the business, actually by them coming from another part of the business, they'll bring ideas of the business with them, but they understand the business. They've got a network. It's slightly easy for them to adapt. But do I want that to be 100%? Probably not, because you need that influx of ideas from outside. So a certain internal promotion ratio is also quite a useful indicator. An employee NPS. So much as we survey our customers' access, we also survey the staff. And what we're looking for there is engagement. So more engaged staff typically go that extra mile. And then myself as a leader, I get measured on ENPS. My ENPS at the minute currently is 9. I'm not afraid to say it. I wish it was higher. I'd love it to be 10, but I'm really happy with 9. And what that basically means is that the people in the pre-sales team, and that's anonymously filled in, what they're based on is the activities we're doing is making me feel more engaged about my job. Therefore, I'm naturally aligned. My goals are naturally aligned with the company as well. I feel at home. So that's a really important factor for me, and something that I take great pride in our team ENPS.
Adam, can I, we've got a request just from one of our viewers that we've got a little window kind of blocking part of your slide screen there. It might be part of Zoom or something like that.
Is it that? Yep.
There we go. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you for that. So that's the EMPS as well. So there's nothing in that top right-hand corner. Don't worry, you've not missed a lot there at all. But I noticed during Kevin's session yesterday, the keynote yesterday, Kevin made a good point. He had two non-financial performance indicators he used: pre-sales utilization and customer-facing time. Now, Kevin made the point that he knew if those two metrics were measured, that the right financial outcomes would come. That's a really good example of having just a couple of hang your hat on KPIs that actively result in having a certain financial outcome. Sorry, that just turned my projector off. So things to consider with non-financial performance indicators, and again, the pros and cons of them, much like the financial promotion indexes. They are a superb indicator of future financial performance. So if my non-financial performance indicators are happening, a non-financial indicator will normally move before the financial impact will happen. Because the financial indicator is a summary of past performance, the non-financial indicator are a measure right there and then of the activities that are happening. So if my NFPIs are moved in the right way, it's safe to assume normally my financial metrics will move the same way. They deal very, very well at times like this, where we've got these exogenous factors, these external factors, things that are influencing my business and my pattern of business. So war, recession, pandemic, doesn't matter what it is. We can tailor these non-financial metrics. So I could look at, for example, how do my pre-sales guys perform when the demo is web-led rather than in person, right? So for the foreseeable future and for the last 10 weeks, we've not been able to go and see customers. So if I've got pre-sales people that are naturally better over the web and their win ratios are better when it's web demoed, I want to learn from them. I want them to be running internal training. I want them to help percolate that knowledge through the team as well. I can gather data as frequently as I need to. So I don't have to wait for the financial reporting windows, be that weekly, monthly, yearly. I can get this data as frequently as I need to. And I can align the results with the business strategy. So if the business strategy is we want happy customers, we want to look at the cross-sell of products or our market penetration, I can do those kind of things and align with the business goals much easier than just looking at the financials, okay? But the downside of them is, and there's always a downside, is they are a little bit more subjective. So where, like I said, for financial indicators, a pound is a pound is a pound. Actually with these, they are a little bit more subjective. You can interpret these in a number of ways often. And they don't always result in pounds. Like I said, a happy customer isn't always the customer that spends the most. Sometimes an unhappy customer can spend the most. So don't always think that just by having your non-financial indicators move in the right way, the pounds are going to follow, right? And it can be hard and costly to gather data. So just because you can go and get everything, you can spend more time gathering and collating data than you can actually interpreting it. And it can cost a lot of money. You need to put systems in place and processes. Because financial data is automatically harvested, it's always harvested, right? So any business in this world is collating financial data. Therefore, it's very easy to go and put hands on. There is no harvesting of the non-financial data necessarily. So you have to go get that. And it can be really time consuming to analyze. I've found this, the non-financial stuff tends to take up more of my time than the financial analysis. And that's something you really need to consider. So second question really is, what I'd like to ask you guys is, of the people on this call, how many of you feel that you have non-financial performance indicators as part of your KPIs? That's what I'd really like to know. You can see this building up here. Hopefully people understand what non-financial performance indicators are now. The interesting thing is, we're up at 27, 28, and almost 30% of people, 1 in 3 are virtually have no KPIs there. We'll just let a few more votes come in. Kind of what we expect to see, actually. This is good. Cool. So we'll just move on. You'll be able to view the results. You can still vote on that slide until we get to the next one. You can view the results in the app as well. There's a button at the end. So just taking it back to that survey, like I said, the excellent service, and this is where I really started to get the bulk of my annotation, right? So I start to look further down and go, well, why are certain KPIs not appearing higher? And that's really where the idea for this session came about when I first discussed it with John. And I was surprised to see feedback from sales actually slightly above feedback from customers, although the same metric. Feedback from customers is almost your ultimate third-party evidence of how well someone is performing. If the customer thinks you perform well, that's really what matters, right? So I was surprised to see that as low as it was. And that's something we've introduced last financial year at Access. So we have QR codes on the end of slides. We have a form in place. You'll see an example of that at the end. And what a prospect can do, or a customer, is they can whip out the phone. It's anonymous. They can put the details in if they want to, and we make it very, very explicit. This feedback is not linked to your propensity to buy. I just want to get a gauge on how did you enjoy the demo. And what we're also doing is we're actually harvesting data for our product team. So what we do is we harvest data on how well the performance of the pre-sales person was, the quality of the performance, the quality of the slides, things like that. But we're also saying, what was the quality of the product you saw? Take it away from the sales cycle. How do you feel right now? And what we're doing is we're getting some really, really valuable insights there. And further down as well, product knowledge and certifications, again, very low. So this idea of personal development, professional development, I saw a poll on LinkedIn only this morning, actually, and it was, what percentage of people have actually taken this time during COVID to invest in their professional development and their certification? It was surprisingly low. I expected almost, within pre-sales, getting on for, 80, 90%. It was like 40%. So either people were, taking it for granted that it's their employer's responsibility to develop, but like I would always say is, I've always given myself non-financial performance indicators. I didn't wait for someone to give that to me. So I would track CPD, continue professional development. And I would understand, well, what am I doing to develop myself every year? Therefore, I can progress and I can be better than I was last year. So I'd expect, even if you're not given some of these KPIs, why not introduce them yourself? If you're part of a team or you're newer to pre-sales, give yourself some aspirational non-financial performance indicators, because I guarantee if you move that needle, your career will follow, right? So the other thing is, and I was speaking to another pre-sales leader actually when I decided on this topic, and we were kind of talking about the topic generally. He's like, I really, really want to bring some of these into the business. I know he's going to be on this call, so I'll be careful. I'm not going to name and shame, but we were just kind of generally talking about this. He said, where do you start? Like, he said, I want to go get this data, but I'm that busy, with making sure the team do what they need to do and all the other things. I just don't know where to start. And I thought this was really relevant. Now we know what NFPIs are. How do we actually get started with them? So I break it down a real simple 3-step process. Anything you see with me, say if it can't be done in 3 or 4 steps, it's quite hard to do. So I try and simplify absolutely everything. So the first thing I would always say is, what do you want to change? Do you want to change your team culture? Do you want to change how knowledgeable and experienced your team are? Or do you want to change, for example, things like the cross-sell or your customer? What kind of those 3 factors? Remember those: external customer, internal process, or individual. What metric are you trying to move? Number 2, how are you going to measure it? So just because you want to measure something doesn't mean it's easy to do. So you need to kind of get a good stab on, well, how am I going to go and collect this data? I know what I want to know, but how am I going to go do it? That might put a barrier in your way of being able to go do this. And the final thing is, how are you going to report and use the data? Nobody wants a dashboard leader or people to be living in dashboards. I think we've got to a stage in pre-sales where there's so much data and so much analysis data. I'm aware of leaders that don't actually lead anymore. I would hasten to say, I would say that people are becoming so reliant on the numbers and living within a dashboard that they're missing the obvious. And the obvious for me is I try and take a 5-to-1 ratio. So if over a given month, I've spent 1 day collating or understanding dashboards or reports, I'll spend 5 days trying to influence that data. So what I will not do is say to the team, okay, win ratios are lower. Win ratios are lower. I mean, our win ratio hovers around 54%, 55%, which is incredibly good. But what I will then say to the guys, okay, well, if it's not, how do we make it better? I don't kind of, ram the win rates down people's throat. I'm trying to spend more of my time influencing that number than I am reporting that number. So don't make it, if you make a monster, you've got to feed a monster, right? So try and create something that's sustainable, that doesn't take up all of your time to report. And I thought this was useful. This is a model, plenty of people will say, this is me just whiteboarding. This is something I do on my iPad quite a lot. So you'll have seen this maybe used elsewhere. And if you haven't, it's a very, very good model for decision making. And what I'm basically doing is on the vertical axis, I'm deciding on impact, okay? And on the horizontal axis, I'm deciding on effort. And that obviously runs high to low. And then I divide my section into 4 quadrants. And what I'm going to do is each of my non-financial performance indicators or actions I want to do, whatever you're using this kind of template for, I'm going to map them. So that item A is incredibly high effort, but it also offers me a high impact. B is low effort, low impact. D is the unicorn, as I call it. That is the high impact, low effort. They very rarely exist. I wish they did more, but they don't. And F and G also sit in that top right quadrant there. And then what I need to kind of factor is, what am I going to do? I probably haven't got enough time and resource to do everything. So those low effort that result in impact, I'm just going to do those. Okay, I should just do them, assuming they give me the required level of impact. D is, I really want to do that, and I almost want to make that a priority to get that done as well, because it should be low effort. E, I'm not going to bother with, I'm not going to let distract me. And now I've got a choice to make between A, F, and G. I can't do all three. They're all high effort. They all give me an impact. What I'm going to do is focus on A and F in that scenario. I'm going to leave G for another day. But what that allows me to do is separate the wood from the trees. It allows me to be have a lot more impact for the time I've got. And that way I'm not spending all my time, you know, analyzing all of those various items. I'm going to make and use my time to move the needle, right? And that's what I encourage you to do. But I thought just running through that was worthwhile. So if we go back to that very first model, and like we said, we've got David and Andrea, and we've got their financial performance. What we could look at, it's very, very easy to say, well, David's my star performer. You know, his order intake is higher than Andrea's by a significant margin. His smashed his target, whereas Andrea's under target. It's very easy to say that David's my performer, whereas Andrea isn't performing. That doesn't necessarily paint the true picture. So what I've done is overlaid now some non-financial performance indicators. These are ones that I look at internally. These are ones that I use. So I'm looking at David there. Is customer NPS 7.1 versus 9.2. 7.1 is not bad, but 9.2 is excellent. Okay, you would take that every day of the week. The number of accreditations, so that could be new product, that could be soft skills, doesn't matter. It's development. You know, Andrew's is 4 to 1. It's a significant ratio higher, but the number of meetings is lower. So I could say, well, is it that David's revenue is higher because he's just doing more meetings? But then if you look at the number of articles created that helps marketing, that helps the pipeline, that helps the company, Andrea's doing far more than David. So is it that Andrea's been a little bit selfless? She's not going to the number of meetings because she's spending more of her time doing marketing articles. Is it that Andrea's newer, she's training, which is why the accreditations are higher. She brings with her a new way of working, which is why her NPS is higher. But she's also got a lot to give, which is why she's writing the articles. But the interesting thing for me is the end. And when I spoke about NFPIs reacting to the scenarios, that web demo-led win ratio is double what David's is. So as I move into a post-COVID period where web demos are likely to be the norm for the foreseeable future, actually, I want to know what's Andrea doing that David isn't, because that 12% could harm me next year. It could harm David, but it could harm me as a financial output. Whereas Andrea's, if I can just get that a little bit higher, that would be superb, right? So I want to drill into that as well. And so what I'd ask you there is, you know, given that Andrea's non-financial performance metrics are far higher than David's, but David's financial performance is far higher than Andrea's. If you were appraising these guys, how would you appraise them? So I'll ask you the question there, and it's an interesting question, is if you were appraising David and Andrea, who would have the more positives? Not that they're both not positive, but who would have the more positive for you? And just let some votes come in. I'm gonna have to temper Andrea's excitement after this session. She's gonna ring me saying, okay, we need to talk money, we need to talk metrics here. Cool. So you can see what you guys are doing there is placing more reliance and you're placing more value on the non-financial performance indicators. That discrepancy between Andrea and David is far higher. And effectively what you've done there is give the more positive appraisal to someone that's actually not met target, which is a really interesting idea. And you can really see how non-financial performance indicators can shape your future, because what you're saying is that you're doing all the right things. Do you know what? You might have just been unlucky last year. You might have missed out on that big deal, not through any fault of your own. You could have just missed out on that deal, and therefore, you know, you've missed your target, not through any fault of your own necessarily. So, you know, there's that side to it as well, but quite interesting there. And so, if we were to put that into that model, if you remember, we had those scenario A, B, and C there for Andrea's output, and where did we likely to see? When we just considered financial metrics, we didn't actually know where we were going to end up. There is, like I said, past financial performance is no indicator of future financial performance. But what we can do is use those non-financial performance indicators and say, well, the likelihood is David's probably going to remain static. Okay, given what we know about the market, given that he hasn't gone and learned a lot of new products, you know, he's kind of doing a lot of meetings already. We can't really move many of those metrics that are going to result in anything. We could probably increase his customer NPS and we could probably increase his web demo, but we also know the market might be more difficult. So chances are probably going to stay roughly level. And you know what? If he produced 120% next year, I'd be really happy in this kind of climate. And Andrea, we could say, well, she's likely to continue that upward trajectory. You know, she's got herself more accredited. Her web demo win ratio is higher. And she's producing a lot of content. And what I could say is if you can throttle back on maybe some of that content, or we can spread that around the team more, actually I can utilize Andrea to her fullest, which is she's great at web demos. So actually what I would do overall there is actually improve the overall team performance by aligning where I put activities, given someone's skill set. So what you can use is your non-financial performance indicators to actually make the whole team better and the whole team's worth more. And that's really what we're trying to do in pre-sales. But there are no guarantee that that's going to happen. It's just an indicator. But my point is, by understanding the non-financial performance indicators, gives us a rough steer. We could, you know, have a guesstimate of where we think people are likely to be. Okay. So just kind of bring this close, because I'm really conscious of time now, is a little bit of a call to action, really, and a little bit of summary to kind of start to finish off, really, which is have a look at your metrics. Like I say, I speak to pre-sales leaders regularly, and a couple I've spoke to about I'm doing this, like, yeah, you know, I really need to go back and have a look at those in light of how the business has moved. Probably analyzing KPIs, a lot of businesses will, especially, you know, if you're a more mature business that's maybe, you know, not seeing that kind of exponential growth that we are forced to look at our metrics regularly because our business is changing fundamentally year on year. So we have to look at our metrics. But if you're in a business that's maybe more established and is already a large player in the industry, what's the motivation for you to go and look at different metrics and try something new? You know, I always like to think with my pre-sales team, I'd rather us try something that not quite work than not have the bravery to go try. And I think that's really important. Could you introduce some new financial metrics that that you aren't doing? So not just, you know, ignore the financial metrics, but have you got them there that you need to? And could you alongside that introduce some non-financial performance metrics? But really, it's just an understanding of, even if you're not given, if you're on this call and you're newer to pre-sales or you're more experienced and you're about to retire, it doesn't matter where you are in your career, okay, or where you are in seniority. Maybe give yourself some KPIs, right? So maybe just keep a track next year of how many new products you've learned, how many hours did you spend developing yourself? You know, ask a couple of customers for feedback at the end of the demo. You know, just because you're not issued with a KPI doesn't mean you can't be a master of your own destiny. And I love when guys in my team do this, go, you know what, I've been trying this, it's really worked, look at this. And I'm like, great, let's do this company-wide. That's how you become a COVID superstar, right? Bring ideas to the table, don't bring problems. And are you adapting to COVID? So that session I said at the start about adapting and optimizing, really, what can you take away from this? Is there anything you're kind of, I want us to go with a renewed vigor. You know, pre-sales as an industry-wide, we're a strange mix of product and sales, and it's quite a niche industry, and a lot of people know everybody else, and it's in all of our interest to raise our brand, to raise our profile, and to increase our worth. And so if you get the right KPI set, it's very, very easy to say, this is what we bring to a business and what we bring to the industry. And that's only going to help all of us. And can technology help? I know we've been using Consensus probably about 6 months now. And for us, that's brought with it new metrics because we've got this new data. And so we explored, because we kind of, you know, hit a bit of a wall, right? We need to digitalize, we need to change, but have you looked at how technology can help? You know, we've all got more CRM and more data. We're surrounded by data. You know, I firmly believe that data is the new oil. You know, the amount of data that we have got available to analyze is exponential. And I think what you've really got to do is bring in the technology that helps you get that data, but then really have a nice process to analyze that data as well. And my final 2 thoughts: never waste a crisis and always move the needle. So that impact effort, if your efforts are not going to result in anything, why do it? Okay, go do something else. Really understand how you're moving the needle, but do not waste this time. This time you've got on COVID, you might be on this call and you've been furloughed. You know, we're lucky at Access, we've not furloughed anybody. But then I've spoken to people in the industry I know that have been furloughed, and I say, you know what, you need to do some LinkedIn courses, right? Do some learning and development, do whatever you need to do, but come out of this stronger, and that's the key. So with that in mind, I'm a big fan of collecting feedback. So you've got 2 QR codes there, feel free. The left one, if you scan that with your camera, That's going to link you straight to my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. I put the odd thing about pre-sales in, but if any of you just want a virtual, coffee and a chat, feel free. I'm always up for that. And over on the right-hand side there, a bit of feedback as well. So create a very, very simple online form, really good example of what we would do at the end of a sales demonstration potentially, or a customer engagement. And it's really, I'm trying to get your feedback. How did you find today? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What could be better? What could be worse? And any comments you want to make as well. Hopefully that's more positive than negative, but you know what? Any feedback is good feedback. You can always act on it. So with that said and done, I hope everyone stays fit, healthy and well. I'd like to thank the guys for putting this event on. I think it really, really promotes our brand. It helps us connect and it helps us be better, and that can only be a good thing. So, really great job Gary and John have done in organising this, and all the other people behind that as well. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to come to this session, because I really do appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam. What a fantastic lot of just quality information there. I've got 2 questions here. Actually, we've got like 50 really fantastic questions. We obviously can't get to them all. Highly recommend that you connect with Adam on LinkedIn. We'd love to have everybody jump into the LinkedIn group that we've set up and start this Q&A session kind of going there. And just get as many of these answered as we can kind of over time. But in this session, I thought there were a couple of really good ones that I'd love to have you field, Adam, if that's okay. So the first one, kind of calling you out, and I'm anxious to hear your answer to this. Says the question says, you talk about all of your employees perform over 100%. You want NPS to be all 10. If everything is perfect and great, how are you and your team growing and improving? A general management and HR rule, this is very interesting to me, is to always score to allow for growth and improvement.
That's why you can measure percentages above 100, so we're very lucky. We've got a very, very talented sales team at Access, and we work very well as a pre-sales to sales organization. We're not 2 divisions. We kind of sit within, and we work together very well. What I would say is that, do we ever hit 10s? Do we ever always hit 100%? No. In terms of some of the metrics that we put out, we set them at the start of the year, and we set processes up. And like I said, right at the start of this call, I always like to set the teams up for success. So does everyone always hit 100% overall? No. Does the whole business hit 100%? No. We invariably always hit our targets. We definitely do that in terms of financial metrics. But some of the softer stuff, no, they are aspirational. To get a 10 on the NPS score is virtually unheard of, as far as I can tell. I think Apple have actually got the highest NPS in the world, and I don't think theirs is quite 10. So, that will always be an aspirational goal. And you could argue that if that's at 10, are you doing too much? Are you spending too much time that's not resulting? So, there's always arguments. I think that's a really, really great question. But I always like to think, if we set a target, it's always a hard target to achieve. It's definitely never an easy target to achieve with the kind of growth we've got. But what we do is we set ourselves up for success very, very well, and we plan well, and we execute even better.
Thanks, Adam. Really appreciate you fielding that one. And one more that I thought a lot of people might be struggling with maybe comes from David, and it says, we haven't done a good job of capturing activity information from the team. I would like to ensure them that it's not a big brother situation. What strategies can we use to ensure good data input from them to start measuring these NFPIs?
That's really, really interesting. I had exactly the same conversation with my team when we embarked on doing event logging. So we put an event into CRM. That event is either logged against the account, the opportunity, or it can just be linked. It's just an event that goes in, right? And then we look at utilization overall, and we look at what we're significantly doing. And I say to the guys, you know, I'm not expecting 100% of time to be logged. That's a key thing I would say. Never expect 100 time, because it becomes a timesheet. When I was in accounts, I used to have to do a timesheet down to 15 minutes, and I hated it, right? I hated accounting for every 15 minutes of my day. I would not expect the pre-sales team to be doing that. So I kind of say, you know, anything that's significant, half an hour, 45 minutes above, even if it's 15 minutes and it has a material impact on the sales cycle, log it down, okay? But what I say is, actually it's designed to help people. So if like you saw that scenario there, you saw how much difference that had on Andrew's appraisal. Now, if I was just going off financial metrics and I had no event login and didn't understand what Andrew had done, would that appraisal have been as positive as it otherwise would be? Probably not. And so what we're actually doing is by understanding management style is very much, I prefer the carrot to the stick. The stick for me doesn't work. It's quite an old way of working for me. And so if you can motivate a team and strive to be better, and if someone's slightly doing more events or is more in demand somewhere, what do they know that the other person doesn't, and help to shape them? And that's down to good leadership as well. So I would always set out your stall very, very early that this is not Big Brother, and it isn't. I do not use that. I have a rough kind of percentage of how utilized someone is, but do I care if someone's 90 or 80% utilized? Not really. I'm more bothered about when I mix that with the other metrics. If I see every other metric suffering and I see a low utilization, yeah, it's probably a problem for me. But actually in the main, I kind of look at things on balance. And I think that's the message you've got to try and get. If you don't do event logging, you're missing a big chunk of data that will help you shape. So you've really got to set your stall out early with your teams as to why you're collecting that data. People don't mind change when you tell them why, usually. It's when people don't communicate the why very well, that's when you're going to hit a problem.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Hey, we've run up against our hard stop. We were just a little bit over, so I just want to give everybody, I just want to thank you again for coming out and doing this, just a really stellar session. And I want to remind everybody in about 12 seconds that we've got in about 10 minutes time, these are the next sessions we've got coming up. Track 1 is 7 Habits of Highly Effective POCs with Tony. He's from over at Citrix. Going to be a really fantastic session there. And then if you're not familiar with Freddie Mangum, he's making big waves, publishing some great articles in pre-sales on LinkedIn right now. Big pre-sales advocate about how his session, the title is just slightly out of date. There's a tilt to his session that is essentially how to increase the influence of pre-sales at your organization. And so really highly recommend those as well. Great, everybody. Remember, you've got to quit out of this one and join the next one if you want to join those sessions. Take care.